With Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth, let's continue our conversation with retired Naval Vice Admiral Norbert Ryan, who is with us from Newsmax, Washington. Admiral, General Keane points out that military pay raises have been held at 1%. Now, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I always heard the first rule of command is to make sure those in your command are well equipped and well taken care of and well trained. Are we violating essentially the cardinal principle of an all-volunteer force by having these severe cuts to military pay?
We're really taking a lot of risk on, Congressman. These two pay raises of 1% are below the congressionally mandated pay raise, as General Keane said, to keep up with the cost of living. And pay and benefits are right at the top when you're talking about trying to keep our best young non-commissioned officers and officers in for a career, because they then become the cadre of leaders that lead our all-volunteer force. So we need to keep in this group that is the most combat experience we have. The Joint Chiefs have an impossible mission right now, and Congress has got to help them by giving relief from sequestration, asking them to take $50 billion out of the budget again in 2016 with everything that's going on, whether it's in Ukraine or Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or fighting the help of Ebola in West Africa. All these things are requiring our troops to continue to be away as we cut our forces. And so the Joint Chiefs are trying to keep this balance, Congressman, that you talked about between readiness and the number of people and the number of weapon systems. It's getting too difficult to handle, and they're making some poor decisions on the personnel side because of it.
What would be a reasonable expectation? Like if you were going to give them a raise, what would be reasonable?
The cost of living. Just to keep up with inflation, Miranda. You know, we worked for 13 years while the congressman was in office. Thanks to the Congress, we wiped out a 13.5% deficit between civilian pay and military pay between 2000 and 2010. But guess what? Since 2011, we started to go back to a negative growth in personnel compensation of a minus 1.5%. All of this is going on, Miranda, while we're asking our troops to still do too many deployments and be away from their families for too much time. And this is a very bad combination that will result in us not being able to keep in the best and the brightest.
Admiral, back during my early days in Congress, Newt Gingrich used to talk, metaphorically speaking, about turning the Pentagon into a triangle. In other words, there were responsible reductions in spending that could be made. From your vantage point right now, with sequestration, is there anything there that is cut, that needed to be cut? Or is this a situation where they're taking out a meat cleaver when a scalpel would do better in terms of military spending? We've got a couple of minutes left, sir.
Well, Congressman, again, a very good question. Again, the Joint Chiefs have not been given much discretion, and Secretary Hagel has not been given much discretion when you have to cut this amount of money out of one department in the federal government. And so the Joint Chiefs have a very impossible job right now. But there are some things that we do support. We do support them making a good case for having this balance between the number of weapon systems, the troops, and the number of installations. We think the Defense Department needs to make a good case for cutting some of the bases, and Congress needs to go along with it. But even more importantly, in my article in the Wall Street Journal, I pointed out that our major 85 weapon systems are $411 billion over their initial cost estimates. $411 billion. The Defense Department has got to do a better job of managing these weapon systems before we ask for our troops to pay for their own bullets.
Do you think things will change at all now with Republicans taking over the Senate?
If you're in Washington, you have to be optimistic, Miranda, and I am optimistic because I think we have a new group of leaders in the Senate. We have some new folks coming in the House. The House has been very supportive. We're hopeful that the Senate will become more supportive now to take a fresh look at this and give some relief from sequestration. Plus, you have Secretary Hagel, who has had an impossible job but understands the troops. We're hoping that if Ash Carter is confirmed, he will come in and work with the Congress, the new Congress, to get relief from sequestration. That's the number one thing they need to do. And then they need to become partners on looking at keeping this balance, perhaps doing away with some of our stations around the country. The Joint Chiefs say we have way too many stations for the number of people. We've supported them coming down in people, but not at the quick rate that they're coming down. They're having to give pink slips to young officers and NCOs over in Afghanistan, and that's just unacceptable to the Military Officers
And
Association.
that is where we will have to leave it, Admiral Ryan. We thank you very much for your analysis of the situation, for your point of view, and we hope to have you back real soon. We're coming back with more here on America's Forum from Newsmax TV.